Senate convening roll call. Day 10, Monday, January 27th, 2025. Anderson? Here. Barlow? Present. Boner? Here. Brennan? Here. Case? Present. Cooper? Here. Crago? Here. Crum? Here. Dockstetter? Here. Driscoll? Here. French? Here. Giroux? Here. Hicks? Here. Hutchings? Here. Ide? Here. Jones? Here. Kolb? Present. Landon? Here. Larson? Here. McEwen? Here. Nethercott? Here. Olson? Here. Pappas? Here. Pearson? I'm here. Rothfuss? Here. Salazar? Here. Schuler? Here. Scott? Here. Smith? Excused. Steinmetz? And President Beitman.
Here.
Mr. President, 30 present, 1 excused.
Thank you. Our chaplain of the day is our good friend, Father Thomas Cronkleton Jr. from St. Mary's Cathedral. Please stand and he'll offer a prayer for us this morning.
And let us pray. Lord God, as we return to the Senate floor after a weekend of rest and as we begin the third week of this legislative session, we pray that you have rejuvenated us and graced us with the vigor to engage in the tasks before us. Guide our deliberations and discussions as we continue to introduce legislation and consider bills and resolutions on second and third reading. Grace us with knowledge, wisdom, and good judgment. Help us always to work for the good of all the people of this great state, recognizing that we sometimes might not fully agree on what is in the best interest of everyone, but not letting any differences cause major divisions or strife. Bless this day and all that we seek to do and accomplish. We ask this in all things in your holy name. Amen.
Senator Cooper, will you lead us in the pledge?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Reading correction approval of journal. Will the reading clerk please read the journal committee report?
Mr. President, your journal committee reports that the journal of January 24, 2025 has been read and recommends that it be approved. Senator Crum, chairman.
Are there any objections? Hearing none, the report is adopted. We have no doctor of the day. Ladies and gentlemen of the Senate, we have our new student page. Her name is Madeline Elston. She is a senior from Natrona County High School in Casper. And yeah, she's boy, looking at her application, you know how I said the bar was set pretty high by our last page, but I think we might just keep raising the bar here. She's a tennis player, team captain of that, captain of the Nordic ski team, outstanding scholastic achievement award, all kinds of awards. There are like 2 pages of awards here. She's kind of a big deal is what I'm trying to say. Please welcome to the Senate, Madeline, and give her a big round of applause. All right, welcome to the Senate, Madeline. Take good care of her. All right. Today in Wyoming history, on this day in 1920, Wyoming became the 27th state to ratify the 19th Amendment to the U.S. Constitution, giving women the right to vote. Hear, hear. Yep, we're pretty cool when it comes to that stuff. Today in history, International Holocaust Remembrance Day. In 1945, the liberation of Auschwitz, the largest Nazi concentration and death camp. So that's a big day in history. Today is National Chocolate Cake Day, for those of you that like chocolate cake. The quote of the day, "What lies behind you and what lies in front of you pales in comparison to what lies inside of you." Ralph Waldo Emerson. The bad dad joke of the day. Who keeps putting bad? It's the dad joke of the day. I'm telling you. Okay. Why does Sunday always beat Monday in arm wrestling? Because Monday is a weekday. Announcements. Senators, remember that all bill drafts must be approved by the sponsor and returned to LSO by noon today. That is noon today. This cutoff rule requires more than providing LSO with a draft request or your final edits to a bill draft. It requires that the bill draft be completed and approved by the sponsor with all co-sponsors by the new deadline. So that takes care of the announcements. And Senator Nethercott, Majority Floor Leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. Good senators, we will be caucusing right now down in room W113. It will be a full Senate caucus to go over the goldenrod, additional information there, and bills on third reading here this morning, and give you a little bit of breathing room regarding that deadline you just heard from the president of noon today for the introduction of bills. So, good senators, we will be caucusing right now in room W113 for the next hour. We will come back for second reading at 11:15. So, Mr. President, I move that the Senate beg leave to rise and sit again, and that we stand
Stand at ease.
recessed until 11:15 a.m.
Okay. Motion is to stand at recess till 11:15 to allow us to caucus and for allow the members to work on their bill draft deadlines. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed? Motion's been adopted. The Senate will stand at recess till 11:15 a.m. Okay, Senate will come back to order. Reports from standing committees.
Mr. President, the following reports are dated January 27, 2025. Committee number 4, Education, to whom is referred Senate Joint Resolution 3, commemorating Nellie Taylor Ross, respectfully reports same back to the Senate with the recommendation that it do pass. Ayes, Senators Brennan, Olson, Rothfuss, Schuler, and Scott. Senator Schuler, Chairman. Mr. President, Committee number 7, Corporations, Elections, and Political Subdivisions, to whom is referred Senate File 111, Net Metering Revisions, respectfully report same back to the Senate with the recommendation that it do pass. Ayes, Senators Case, Dockstetter, Lambden, and Steinmetz. No, Senator Boner. Senator Landon, Acting Chairman.
Thank you, Randy. Bills on second reading. Senate File 9, second reading of the Senate file.
Senate File 9, Restoration of Rights Amendments.
Senate File 9 having been read 2 separate times. The question is, shall the bill be read a third time? Hearing no objection, it is so ordered. Senate File 10, second reading of the Senate file.
Senate File 10, Settlement Agreements for Minors, Parental Authorization.
Senate File 10 having been read 2 separate times. The question is, shall the bill be read a third time? Hearing no objection, it is so ordered. Senate File 24, second reading of the Senate file.
Senate File 24, Special License Plates for Multi-Purpose Vehicles.
Senate File 24 having been read 2 separate times. The question is, shall the bill be read a third time? Hearing no objection, it is so ordered. Senate File 41, second reading of the Senate file.
Senate File 41, Federal Acts, Legal Actions Authorized.
There is amendment. Will the reading clerk please read it in?
Senate File 41, Second Reading Amendment Number 1, page 4, line 6, delete.
Senator Guru.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'd like to stand to.
Oh, there you go.
There we go. Mr. President, I'd like to move second reading number 1 to Senate File 41 and ask for your favorable consideration. Mr. President, we talked about this good little bill on first reading quite a bit, and the appropriation is $75 million, which is now in lore discussed at the Appropriations Committee level. This is back in the bill, but I think this amendment takes that from 75 million to 5 million. And what we're trying to do, or what I'm trying to do with this amendment, is just simply say that we're in agreement with the general principles and the general idea, but we just don't have the appetite at 75. And so 5 million is what's inserted. Be happy to stand for any questions. Like I say, we've talked about the bill. Be happy to stand for any questions and ask for your favorable consideration.
Is there any discussion? Senator Ide.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Haven't thought about this one a lot. I think we ought to have some discussion on this, actually. I mean, it's a big change. I don't know what the right number is, and I do understand the reason for bringing the amendment. I mean, it's a big appropriation to maybe not be, used for a long period of time. On the other hand, I'm a little leery of it being just too low, too. I don't know if there's a middle ground in there somewhere that we could find. $5 million doesn't hardly get you out of district court with certain issues on federal land issues. And I want to guard this body that we can protect our interests here. So not on or against this amendment, but I think it's a little bit low. So I'd like to hear any more discussion from others here if they have an opinion. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Anybody else? Senator Nethercott.
Thank you, Mr. President. On and for the amendment, good senators. As you recall, last year I voted conflict, and I intend to vote conflict on this bill again. But on the topic of dollars appropriated for potential litigation, I have been surprised and disappointed at the lack of data and or rational basis for the dollar amount appropriated. So Wyoming has a long history of participating in federal environmental litigation. Has anyone tried to go and get the estimated costs associated with those RFP contracts for that litigation? This type of litigation is not the same as a personal injury case where someone gets hundreds of millions of dollars because there's been a tragic death or accident of some sort. This is classic litigation where lawyers are taking depositions and making arguments to a court, and there's no generally damages. This is not a damages type of case. This is legal rights type of case. And so I do think 5 million is a good chunk of money before we could, if we need more, we can always appropriate more, but taking that 75 million out, setting it aside so it can't be used for any other purpose, when we've all seen the goldenrod, I think is not prudent. I think the 5 million serves its purpose. I think it's actually a little too high still, but I'll leave that to the wisdom of the body and express my concern over what I have seen is a knee-jerk reaction to litigate every time, and without maybe justification as to what that looks like, the consequences of such litigation and the costs associated with such litigation.
Thank you. Anybody else? Senator Scott.
Mr. President, just a parliamentary inquiry. My understanding is that our Senate rules will require a roll call vote on this because it's reducing money.
Chief Clerk? Yes. Okay. Senator Cole?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. President. On and for the amendment. I think I've been involved with this whole process about how it got to $75 million. I think what's changed for me is frankly, President of the United States. That's what's changed. So what we were trying to defend before really has changed a lot. I think we'll always be ready to increase this amount of money if it's deemed necessary. But now I think we have a very less adversarial condition between our state and the presidency and what they would like to push. So I think at this point in time, I think putting $5 million in there serves as a placeholder. It does show we're serious about it. I just don't think we need the same amount of money as we needed, say, the last time we had spoken about this. So that's why I'm in favor of the $5 million. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you. Anybody else for their first time? Second time? Senator Ide?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good to hear some comments here. Good Majority Floor Leader mentioned that we could come back for more appropriation if something happened in the interim that we wanted to litigate. I presume we would have to wait till we got back into session to make a further appropriation, since that couldn't happen during the interim. And the good senator from Rock Springs, I agree with those comments that, you know, right now the dust is settled a little bit with the new administration, but we could have another one here not too far down the road. So that's why I'm a little leery of backing off too far, showing that we're settling down here, and the feds will say, well, we got them pacified now. So anyway, thanks for the discussion, and thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. President.
Thank you. Back to you, Senator Grew, for your second and final time.
Yeah, hopefully just to bring this home, Mr. President. Yes, all the things that were mentioned by my colleagues are what went into the thought process. A couple of more things. A, be able to consult with the chief executive on the first floor if we're out of session, to be able to rally support from down there and be able to maybe move dollars along if necessary. And then we can always call ourselves back, but this keeps options open. This keeps us moving forward. And from the discussion I heard on the first reading, it's something that is important to the body to do, so I wanted to put money towards it, but I thought this was a more appropriate number at this time for the reasons specified, and urge your support. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you. Chief Clerk will call the roll on second reading amendment number 1 to Senate File 41.
Amendment roll call. Anderson? Aye. Aye. Barlow? Aye. Boner? Aye. Brennan? Aye. Case? Aye. Aye. Cooper? Aye. Aye. Crago? No. No. Crum? Aye. Dockstader? I. Driscoll. I. French. No. Peru. I. Hicks. I. Hutchings. I. Ide. No. Jones. No. Cole. I. Landon. I. Larson. No. McEwen. No. Nethercott. I. Olson. I. Pappas. I. Pearson. No. Rothfuss. I. Salazar. No. Schuler. I. Scott. I. Smith. No. Steinmetz. I. President Beitman.
Aye.
Aye. Closing vote. Closing. Vote closed on the amendment. 22 aye, 9 no.
The amendment has been adopted. Senate File 41, having been read 2 separate times, the question is, shall the bill be read a third time? Hearing no objection, it is so ordered. Senate File 51, second reading of the Senate file.
Senate File 51, Wyoming Telecommunications Act revisions.
There is an amendment. Will the reading clerk please read it in?
Senate File 51, second reading amendment number 1, page 1, line 7, delete.
Senator Case.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. Mr. President, it's less than 2 weeks away, Mr. President, to spring training, so remember that. But I would move second reading amendment number 1 to Senate File 51 and ask for your favorable consideration. If you recall, Friday was going kind of long, and we had this amendment was on the table. I withdrew it because I wasn't sure that it tracked. Went back and looked, and staff had done it absolutely perfectly. So this is just that section dealing with prepaid wireless phone service and taking out all references to them paying the Universal Service Fund assessment. And recall, they were going to be forced to pay it, but not be eligible to get it. And prepaid wireless, although it is used by one fine senator from one of the most magnificent communities in our whole world here on the Senate floor, it's probably not a good idea to tax these people. And I hope you will support me in the amendment.
Thank you. Any discussion on the amendment? Seeing none. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. All those opposed, no. Amendment has been adopted. Senate File 51, having been read 2 separate times, the question is, shall the bill be read a third time? Hearing no objection, it is so ordered. Senate File 55, second reading of the Senate file.
Senate File 55, third-party filers.
Senate File 55, having been read 2 separate times, the question is, shall the bill be read a third time? Hearing no objection, it is so ordered. Senate File 58, second reading of the Senate file.
Senate File 58, elimination of sales tax on firearms.
There is an amendment. Will the reading clerk please read it in?
Senate File 58, second reading amendment number 1, page 1, line 2, after.
Senator Hicks?
Mr. President, absent any objection, I would ask to withdraw second reading amendment number 1 to Senate File 58.
Hearing no objection, it is so ordered. Second reading amendment number 1 to Senate File 58 has been withdrawn. Senate File 58, having been read 2 separate times, the question is, shall the bill be read a third time? Hearing no objection, it is so ordered. Senate File 74, second reading of the Senate file.
Senate File 74, immunity for drug overdose reporting.
There is an amendment. Will the reading clerk please read it in?
Senate File 74, second reading amendment number 1, page 4, line 5, after.
Senator Crago.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move second reading amendment number 1 to Senate File 74 and ask for your favorable consideration. Last week, we talked at length about this particular bill, and we also talked at length about the 2, what I'm going to call free passes built within the bill. And there was actually an amendment to try to reduce that to 1. It ultimately did not pass, and this is a bit of a compromise on that. And it also addresses one of the other issues that was brought up during discussion of the bill, which is, does the bill address treatment for some of these folks that actually need help? And so what this amendment does, Mr. President, it says in order to get the second free pass or the second applicable immunity provision, you actually have to undergo treatment. And that treatment is, upon the suggestion of the local county attorney. If you complete the treatment, you then are eligible for the second immunity. And so it really accomplishes 2 things. One, gets these people the help they need, and also does not allow for, 2 free passes. It's more of 1.5 as I look at it. And so I'd stand for any questions, Mr. President. Thank you.
Senator Nethercott.
Thank you, Mr. President. Just some questions for the bringer of the bill, or the bringer of the amendment. Would this require then the person who is brought in for an overdose to then be charged with a crime in order for the district attorney or county attorney to have jurisdiction or have that kind of authority to determine whether or not they're compliant with their drug treatment, and how you have authority and access over that drug treatment? Are you going to require them to obtain a substance abuse evaluation to determine the level of treatment required? And then who's going to pay for that treatment? And is just those questions for the sponsor. And then as a drafting piece, it's my understanding that county attorney is what's used throughout the statutes, and that also means district attorney instead of the other way around, but that's a side note.
Okay, anybody else for the first time? Senator Rothfuss.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, I'm curious about the payment side of things. It does say in the last sentence, I see that the individual would pay for it. I'm curious actually how that's done now with the typical treatment alternatives, and maybe some of my attorneys out there can weigh in as well on how that is managed for a circumstance where you have someone that honestly doesn't have the financial wherewithal to actually afford treatment. I would assume that there are resources available for those individuals. With this expressly saying that there would be that requirement in place, I'm curious if that is going to allow then for all people to have access to it, or only those that have the financial means to afford it. And that's a potential concern. So a little discussion about that payment, but kind of in the details of, would we need to amend this on 3rd reading to ensure that those programs could be utilized?
Anybody else for the first time? First time before the sponsor? Good. All right, Senator Craigo.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'll answer the easy question first. So as far as the drafting, actually, the district attorney language is the language that's used throughout statute, not county attorney. And so I referenced county attorney in my statements earlier, but it's actually the district attorney, and then that's used throughout statute. As far as do we have to charge that person? I don't believe so. The county attorneys, the district attorneys, the 2 of them have ability to do. This would be similar to diversion, or they're not actually charged up front. They do the treatment. If they're not successful, then they would be subject to a charging document at that point. Payment, I'm willing to talk about that. I just thought this was the fair way to do it at this point. If we want to talk about something moving forward on 3rd reading, I'm happy to do that with anybody that would like to.
Bill sponsor had already gone for a second time, so we're ready for the question. All those in favor of the motion to adopt 2nd reading amendment number 1, this Senate File 74, please say aye. Aye. All those opposed? The amendment has been adopted. Senate File 74 having been read 2 separate times. The question is, shall the bill be read a 3rd time? Hearing no objection, it is so ordered. Senator Guru.
Thank you, Mr. President. Privilege of the floor.
Granted.
Thank you. Real quick, this morning I got up and I was getting dressed in the dark like we all do. Couldn't find my belt. Had to find a different pair of glasses because I couldn't find my glasses, and had to look real hard to find my shoes. That's the bad news. The good news, my wife's in town. And there she is up there in the gallery, taking pictures of you. Patty up there, wave to everybody. Patty and my daughter, who just graduated from the University of Wyoming, Malou. Patty and Malou, welcome to the Senate.
Welcome to the Senate. All right, Senate File 102, second reading of the Senate file.
Senate File 102, Surviving Parents of Gold Star Veterans Exemptions.
Senate File 102, having been read two separate times, the question is, shall the bill be read a third time? Hearing no objection, it is so ordered. Senate Joint Resolution 1, second reading of the joint resolution.
Senate Joint Resolution 1, Convention of States.
Senator Ide.
Thank you, Mr. President. I just want to kind of explain my no vote on this. I'm still a COS skeptic. I totally agree with my colleagues in here on the premise of this action, but I'm just not convinced this is the right way to go. You know, they don't follow the Constitution right now, and I don't know if an amendment to it will change anything. I'm not entirely sure that a convention can be limited to certain amendments either. I don't think there's any precedent that could happen. You know, every amendment, all 27 amendments to the Constitution were done through Congress. So the only true convention that we've ever had was in 1787. And in my opinion, that weakened states' rights from the Articles of Confederation and centralized more power with the federal government. So again, I think everybody's on the right track with this, but I just wanted to explain myself and thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Ide. Senator Case?
Thank you very much, Mr. President. Mr. President, I rise in support of this measure. It will help the states is the high bar for ratification. That's what protects us from anything that happens in the convention. You'll be there. Only 13 states can block ratification. I have a hard time thinking how you could ever ratify something that's a change to our Constitution across our 50 states when 13 can block it. Think of all the things about the regional differences and all of that. I don't know exactly what will happen at the convention, but I know that because of the ratification process, we have every tool that we would ever need. And it's not, you can ratify it by convention, but legislatures can ratify it. And if we choose to ratify it, we're going to talk about it on this floor. Don't you think we're going to have a serious discussion? Be very powerful, little Wyoming among 13 that could change the course of history. That's pretty awesome. Now, as to whether they're going to ignore it or not, you know, there are different interpretations of the Constitution. There's those of you that look at the black and white print and say, this isn't happening, and you'll look at things and you'll say, they aren't following the Constitution. That's your opinion. The actual court opinions about the Constitution would fill this room. And they're very detailed, and they're expansive, and they tell us about constitutionality. And the Supreme Court rules on constitutionality all the time, with consequences. You may not approve the fact that you don't even think they should be involved in approving the Constitution or the things, but that's what Marbury versus Madison gave us. That is the banking one about the Bank of Maryland. Those great court cases, which Chief Justice Marshall and others gave us the interpretation. But the thing is, we can't get the court to rule on an interpretation unless we have something there that is tightly defined and says the limits. Then they'll have to rule in our favor. The only way we can do that, Congress isn't going to pass anything. They're not going to limit their powers. They're not going to limit the budget. We have to do it. Convention of the States is the way to do it. Let's keep moving.
Thank you. Let's go to Senator Landon and then Senator Driscoll.
Thank you, Mr. President. You know, I have never voted for this bill in all my years serving in the Wyoming Senate until first reading this year. And a lot of what finally has given me a little bit of comfort was just stated by the good senator from Fremont County. But the other piece of it for me is we can't keep doing the same thing over again and expecting different results. And even the administrations that we've had a lot of faith in, those of us who have a more fiscally conservative way about us, even those administrations have kind of let us down, Mr. President. We just continue to add to the national debt. You know, I look at my kids and my grandkids and I think, wow, when does this end, you know? The piece of it that finally gave me enough comfort, Mr. President, is that we do get to bring it back here and we get to talk about it. I've always worried about, you know what, Wyoming loses in things like this. We go back there, we got the right coast and we got the left coast, and that's where all the populations are, and things get going, and I just have always worried about that convention getting way out of hand and Wyoming just getting trampled. Worried a little bit about who we're gonna send back there. But you know what? I'm ready to vote for this. I think it's the time. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you. Senator Driscoll?
Mr. President, thank you. We're under a time deal, on and for, great foundation, watching people get behind this that haven't before. It's the right thing. I'll give the same analogy. It's kind of like the good senator from Bates, great guy, Skip, give his stock every year. This is mine. Envision yourself, we're all going the wrong direction. We know it, everyone here knows where we're at. You're on an airplane and the pilot has a heart attack. You're heading for the ground. Do you go to the back and buckle yourself in and hope for the best, or you try to fly the plane? Folks, this is the only way we've got to get a handle on this. This is a common sense measure that does the right thing. Let's get it out and do it. If you don't do it, you can guess what the results are. We're as red as we've ever been. Back to the 13 states, this is the best opportunity we've ever had to have it our way. Let's take advantage of it.
Thank you. Senator Scott?
Mr. President, something to think about before we vote on this in final tomorrow. The Constitution of the United States has been the most successful political document that's ever been enacted anywhere in the world. Stood the test of time. It works. This is a special way of amending it. The only precedent was when they ignored the charge from the Articles of Confederation and created the Constitution. They got that right the first time. I'm not so sure about a second time. And Mr. President, I think we all assume it's going to turn out the way we want it to. It may not come back here. Congress chooses to send it to specially elected conventions in each state. That's a different way of ratifying it. They can do that. I don't think we can control what they do. I think we're all assuming, well, it's called to put a stop to this problem that we see. I don't trust some of the rest of the country to not try to make the problem worse. And just because it's what we want doesn't mean we're going to get it. Mr. President, I think we're playing with fire with this and any of the other Article 5 calls for constitutional convention. I think we need to think very hard about that between now and third reading tomorrow.
Senator Kolb?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. President. On and for, explained myself when I first got here, I didn't support it. And I honestly didn't know enough about it, didn't feel comfortable about it. And I will add to say that I do support it now because there's there's circuit breakers, there's safeties with this. The runaway convention theory doesn't hold water because anything that happens has to come back here and ratified both by the Senate and the House. And that's our safety breaker if things go south. And it is going to be a very slim margin of states signing on to this. So I believe that doing the same thing and expecting a different result is the definition of insanity. And that's where we're at. Everyone wants to complain, and I agree with them that the federal government is out of control. We don't have term limits. People are there till they pass away. And this is a mechanism that we can affect to make a change. We have a budget that's not balanced. They print money, puts us in a terrible position because now we are dealing with runaway inflation, which devalues our money and your savings and everyone else's money. This is a mechanism to move this conversation forward. I think the circular argument that says that, well, the Constitution's perfect and we shouldn't touch it, well, this is within that body of work. It's in there for this very reason why we're talking about it. Today, we have lost states' rights. And this is a way that we can bring this back for Wyoming to have a say-so in our destiny and our future. So I am on and for Senate Joint Resolution number 1. Thank you, Mr.
Thank you. Senator Hicks?
So, Mr. President, having been here for a number of times and listened to this debate over and over and over for a number of years, one of the things that always strikes me is this isn't the first time this debate occurred. In fact, it occurred historical context back at the ratifying conventions. And if you want to know what the purpose of Article 5 is, rather than us reinvent what the original intent is, just go read the Federalist Papers that were put out there. And it basically says, the purpose of Article 5 is at some point in time, our founders realized that there may be a runaway by our federal government. This provided the check by the states for our ability in those times where we felt that there might be a runaway with the federal government. I would encourage each and one of you, I think it's Federalist number 43. We don't need to debate what the purpose and what the need and what it was intended for. The founders have already given us that. The intent is to put a check on the federal government. And so Article 5 is there for explicit reasons. And if you think that $36 trillion debt is runaway, irresponsible federal government, then maybe it's time that we exercise Article 5. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator. Question being called. Senate Joint Resolution 1 having been read 2 separate times. The question is, shall the bill be read a 3rd time? Hearing no objection, it is so ordered. There's 2nd reading. Bills on 3rd reading and final passage. Madam Majority Floor Leader, do you have a consent list?
Mr. President, I move the 3rd reading consent list as follows. Senate File 20, Oil and Gas Bonding Options and Bonding Pools. Senate File 46, Water and Sewer District Bid Requirements. Senate File 73, Charter School Funding Amendments. Senate File 95, Special Purpose Depository Institution Amendments.
Thank you. Would anybody like anything removed from the consent list? Seeing none. Having been read 3 separate times, the question is, shall these bills pass the Senate? Senate File 20, Oil and Gas Bonding. Oh, Senator Hicks?
Absent objection, if I'm not too late, I would like to have Senate File 42 removed from the consent list.
Okay, it wasn't on the consent list to begin with.
All right. Well, I'm just double checking, Mr. President, belt and suspenders is always a good thing.
We got it. We got you covered. All right. As I was saying, so where was I? I'll just start over. Having received the affirmative vote of the majority, having been read 3 separate times, the question is, shall these bills pass the Senate? Senate File 20, Oil and Gas Bonding, Options and Bonding Pools. Senate File 46, Water and Sewer Districts Bid Requirements. Senate File 73, Charter School Funding Amendments. And Senate File 95, Special Purpose Depository Institution Amendments. Will the Chief Clerk please call the roll?
On the consent list, Anderson? Barlow? Boner? Brennan? Case? Aye. Cooper? Craigo? Crum? Dockstader? Driscoll? French? Guru? Hicks? Hutchings? Ide? Jones? Kolb? Landon? Larson? McEwen? Nethercott? Olson? Pappas? Pearson? Rothfuss? Salazar? Schuler? Scott? Smith? Steinmetz? Repeating aye, no. President Beitman?
Aye.
Aye. Closing vote. Closing. Vote closed. On the consent list, 30 aye, 1 no. Senate File 20, are there any changes? Closing vote. Closing. Vote closed. Senate File 20, 30 aye, 1 no. Senate File 46, are there any changes? Case? Case aye to no. Ide? Sir, you are already a no? Ide is a no?
You voted no on the consent list, so you're good.
Kolb? No. Pearson? No. Steinmetz? No. Hutchings? No. French? No. McEwen? No. Smith? No. Jones? No.
Beitman, no.
Beitman? No. Salazar? No. Closing vote. Closing. Vote closed. Senate File 46, 19 aye, 12 no. Senate File 73, are there any changes? Case aye to no. Ide is no. Closing vote. Guru, aye to no. Closing vote. Closing. Vote closed. Senate File 73, 28 aye, 3 no. Senate File 95, are there any changes? Aye, no to aye. Hutchings? No. Pearson? No. Steinmetz? No. Closing vote. Closing. Vote closed. Senate File 95, 28 aye, 3 no.
Having received the affirmative vote of the majority of the members elected to the Senate, Senate File 20, Oil and Gas Bonding, Options and Bonding Pools. Senate File 46, Water and Sewer Districts, Bid Requirements. Senate File 73, Charter School Funding Amendments, and Senate File 95, Special Purpose Depository Institution Amendments have passed the Senate. Bills on third reading. Senate, Madam Majority Floor Leader.
In light of the bills that have, the third reading bills that have amendments, I think they'll take significant time, and we have a number of committee meetings over the lunch. Mr. President, I move that we stand recessed until 2 p.m.
Okay. Are there any announcements, committee announcements? Let's start with Chairman Barlow.
Thank you, Mr. President. Your committee number 10, Labor, Health, Social Services, will hear Senate File 113, Brader Opportunity Act, and Senate File 112, Anesthesiologist Assistance Licensing at 12:30 in room 110. And Mr. President, if I could also remind the body, the Wyoming Speech Language Hearing Association has lunch for you in the W5354. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Chairman. Chairman Olson.
Thank you, Mr. President. Your committee number 1, Judiciary, will meet at 12:30 in W2 to hear 4 bills: Senate File 116, Anti-Money Laundering; Senate File 122, Voyeurism, Sex Offender Registration Amendment; Senate File 133, Protection of Parental Rights Amendments; and Senate Joint Resolution 5, Congressional Term Limits.
Thank you, sir. Chairman Anderson.
Mr. President, your committee number 9, Minerals, will meet upon noon recess about 12:30 in room W4 and online to hear bill numbers Senate File 97, Trust Code Revisions; Senate File 138, Energy Impacts on Wyoming Economy Study; Senate File 144, Wyoming-Ireland Trade Commission. Thank you.
Thank you. Senator Pappas.
Thank you, Mr. President. Your Transportation Committee will meet tomorrow morning at 8 a.m. to consider the following bills: Senate File 45, Wyoming State Guard Amendments; Senate File 119, Expedited Professional Licensure for Military Members; Senate File 5, School District Vehicles Flashing Lights Authorized; Senate File 106, Motor Vehicle Dealer Manufacturer's Warranty Rates; Senate File 110, Inclusion of Crossing Guards for Governmental Claims Act; and, if time permits, Senate File 121, Rodeo License Plate.
Thank you, sir. Chairman Landon.
Thank you, Mr. President. Your Senate Travel, Recreation, Wildlife, and Cultural Resources Committee 6 will meet downstairs tomorrow morning at 8 a.m., room 4, to take up the following bills: Senate File 108, Recreation, Safety, Agritourism; Senate File 152, Wildlife Management Task Force and State Forester; Senate File 148, Fire Suppression and Restoration Funding; and Senate File 149, Wildlife Conservation License Plates Amendments. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Chairman McEwen.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Committee number 3, Revenue, will meet in room W006 at 12:20 to take up Senate File 68, Government-Owned Lands, and Senate File 85, Constitutional Enforcement of Localities. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Vice President Salazar.
Thank you, Mr. President. The Senate Appropriations Committee will meet upon noon recess today. We'll be dealing with Senate File 30, Wyoming's Investment in Veterans' Mental Health; Senate File 88, 2025 Large Project Funding; Senate File 91, Pictograph and Historic Inscription Protection; Senate File 127, Administrative Rules; and Senate File 168, Budget Reserve Account Repeal. The Joint Appropriations Committee will meet tomorrow upon noon recess, and the Joint Appropriations Committee will meet to receive a staff walkthrough and vote for sponsorship of the 2025 supplemental budget. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you. Any further announcements? You've heard the motion. All those in favor say aye. All those opposed, no. Senate will stand recessed until 2 p.m.